Hey guys, Nicholas here. I'm gonna start a set of videos for RV technicians, new RV technicians. As we get later on in the videos, some of you older RV technicians, you can learn. We're all learning. Technology is constantly changing, but starting off with the basics so that we can help newer people to learn our industry and not make so many mistakes. Okay guys, one of the first things that we're going to cover is our voltmeter and how to properly use it. Just going to be teaching you guys DC voltage today. So for those, I'll stick to that. One of the most important things when you're checking DC is to make sure that you have black and red in the correct spots. My voltmeter, for instance, will give me a negative symbol indicating reverse polarity, that my positive is actually negative and my negative is actually live. So if I have my test leads in the wrong spot on my meter, I'm going to get a false reading of a hot versus a ground. Now that we have our test leads hooked up, looking good, we're going to come to the V. The V on my voltmeter is, on your voltmeter as well, will be voltage. Every voltmeter to get to the AC DC might be different. Yours might have the symbol of straight line with a V over here, so you might have to turn to that for DC voltage. I see some meters that are rated up to a certain voltage, whether it's AC or DC. For mine, I go to the V for voltage, push select, there's hertz, here's my DC voltage. Remember, as we were showing you guys earlier, that it's very important to have black and red in your voltmeter correctly, and here's why. So if we place our black on the negative, red on the positive, we see we're getting a reading of 1317, right? However, if I switch these over, below my DC, I have a negative symbol now, indicating that my polarity is reversed. Whether that's with the wires I'm actually checking, my test leads, because it's my mistake, you'll have to determine. So make sure you have these bad boys in the right spot on your voltmeter, and pay attention to your voltmeter. When it's correct, no negative symbol below the DC. Little things like that will help you make sure you're getting the right readings. One thing that I'll cover briefly to check and make sure that your test leads and your voltmeter are okay. Go to your continuity setting. Once you have it on your continuity setting, the way I was taught in class, anything less than a 3 here is good. I have zeros all the way across, indicating no resistance, good clean connection in my test leads, and my voltmeter is working correctly. A lot of the issues you're going to face on RVs related to DC appliances is going to be tracking down power. So we're going to go over in today's video trailers, fifth wheels, Class C's and Class A's, the different locations of DC power only for today. So if we're not plugged into shore power, so we're just relying on the battery, no converter in there, our power starts. This is our source, our battery, usually located in the A-frame. As you can see, we have some more A-frame on the trailers over there. From the battery, you typically will find these are called DC breakers. Okay, so we can see our positive is going here to a DC breaker, this other DC breaker back inside of the coach. So if you're missing 12 volt inside of the coach, battery, DC breaker, check those. Sometimes I've seen the 12 volt positive go to a junction box. Here we see our junction box mounted to the side, but typically on a trailer you'll see the junction box mounted underneath and below, so don't forget that location. From the battery to the DC breakers, if there's a battery disconnect at this point, that's typically the next spot that we're going. Typically a battery disconnect will be located in this front area, this front compartment. However, in this trailer I'm not seeing one, so we're good to go. Check my other side. No DC breaker here. From our battery to our DC breakers, no battery disconnect in this case. We go inside. To our distribution center. Fuse panel is another name for it. DC block is another name for it. From that battery through those DC breakers, power's coming directly here to my distribution center. From my distribution center, if it's a simple appliance that just goes through a switch, such as a light, or most slide motors on trailers, it's going from my distribution center to my switch. Some appliances don't go through switch. For instance, this refrigerator. I'm going from my distribution center, 12-volt wires in the back of the refrigerator first. My incoming DC voltage there, then through their assortment to their control board, eyebrow board inside. Another instance of where it's not going to a switch would be air conditioners with a thermostat. On a Dometic, that 12 volt is coming up to the control board. The control board is going to send it to the thermostat. If you're dealing with the Coleman, it can be going directly to your furnace and then up to your T-stat and then to your control board, or it can be going to your T-stat and then your control board on a Coleman. So no switch involved there. For other things, like we mentioned, is going from our distribution center, it has to come up to our switch. Once at our switch, the power has to go through the switch. So if you're checking a switch, you're going to check and make sure you have power at that switch, but also power through that switch. So it's here, the supply, the DC power is at my switch. I have to make sure it's going through the switch. Past the switch, it should be going directly to your appliance. Awning, distribution center, switch, to the switch, through the switch. That pretty much sums up the DC of a travel trailer. Let's head on over to fifth wheels and we'll go over a few different changes there. All right guys, next we're going to cover the fifth wheels, okay? The only main difference between the fifth wheels travel trailers is location of batteries, location of DC breakers, location of your battery disconnects. Once we get past that point, everything is the same past that. We go to our distribution center again, we go to our fuse panel, okay? From there we go to our switches, if it's a switched appliance, or we go directly to the appliance, such as in the instance of refrigerators and air conditioners, okay guys? So inside the coach, everything stays the same. Your breaker box might be in a different location. Your breaker box for AC might be separate from your DC. It might be one, it might be in the bedroom, the front cap, who knows where it is. That everything is the same inside of there. Location of these. So the first thing I do when I come up to a fifth wheel and I'm looking for my battery so I can check the voltage there, I'm gonna look for these vents. These are vents that are for your battery, so the gases have a place to go. The gases don't build up inside of a sealed compartment and risk an explosion. So I see the vents here in the front. I can rest assured that unless somebody's done something crazy, my batteries are right here on this fifth wheel. Here you'll notice my vent is on the side. So if I'm looking for the battery and trying to save time, okay, I see vents over here. I've got two compartments. Not here. Here we go, vent to vent. All right, so again, we start at our battery. From our battery, we're gonna go to our DC breakers. Typically the DC breakers are going to be located relatively near where your battery is. On the fifth wheels, here's my batteries. Two 12 volts ran in parallel. Back here we can see DC breakers, high amperage fuses, ground block. Okay, the negatives of your battery, your grounds, they just tie into the metal. You'll see ground blocks, you'll see screws. In case you ever have one where they're using two black wires or a black and a white and you're not sure which one is your ground, just give it a little follow right to the metal. That way you can't mess it up, okay guys? From our DC breakers, our high amp fuses, some low amperage fuses as well, we should be going to a battery disconnect. So location, guys, where are these things on these fifth wheels? Well, just like the batteries, you're gonna find them in the front area. There are different locations for them. Typically, a lot of them are in this basement area, like we see right here, okay? Other ones, like this unit right here, are in this area. And still yet again, here. Now on some of them you will see not in this area, might not see it in that front area, but there might be a little water station, okay? And it might be over here or over here. So don't forget to check this section. Regardless of where your battery disconnect is, it is generally going to be in one of this basement area. So just check all of your basement area, be very thorough. You should find your battery disconnect. Something else to be alert for, okay? I see a battery disconnect. I see this panel, I see my wires going back here. There's a good chance that they've hidden some DC blocks back here. So if you got one that's just racking your brain, follow your battery cables. If you see them going back here as well as a fuse, take these screws out, pull that. Probably some DC breakers back there not allowing your voltage through. Okay guys, so kind of a similar setup, just location. Remember, look for your vents if you're looking for your battery. DC breakers close to our battery. Then battery disconnect. Battery disconnect. From there the power is going into our distribution center, our fuse panel. From our fuse panel, it's going to our switches if it's a switched appliance, or it's going directly to the appliance if there's no switch involved. Now all of these that I'm teaching you this morning, trailers, fifth wheels, the drive bulls that we'll go to next, this is just DC without the converter. Okay, this is if you're unplugged and you're not going to see that converter voltage. The converters will be covered in a later video, so stay tuned and we will go over converters, inverters as well, how to check them, what you should be seeing, how to track. All right guys, good morning. Like discussed, we're going to go over Class C's next. Then after that, we'll find us a good old Class A like that one over there, and we'll go over the DC system on a Class A, okay? So remember, this one is plugged in. Seem to be having converter issues, but we're just going over location because I'm trying to teach you guys how to track down your power. Where am I losing power at? Which this one might be a good example. So typically on a Class C, a lot of times they love to put the batteries under the stairs, okay? That's the start. That's the very first place that we need to start if we're trying to track down some DC voltage. It's typically where I start. If they're not under the stairs, start with the most simple. If there are a couple of compartments by your front door, check that area. If not, just continue to check around the basement. your outside basement compartment should have your battery. Okay. To save time, I've already located this house battery. We're hunting down the house battery right now. You can see I found it in a nice compartment right here. Boy, does that girl look rough. Ouch. All right, so we go from battery, like we discussed, DC breakers, battery disconnect. So here's one of the tricky things about the Class C's, Class A's, is when you have a battery disconnect solenoid. Some RVs, like this fine one over here, have the simple twist out battery disconnect. That's pretty easy, right? Usually it's going to be pretty close to your front door, like we see here, knob style battery disconnect. But when you've got that solenoid, boy, do they love to hide it in different places. So how do I find it? Well, here's how I teach everybody, and here's how I'm going to teach you guys. The easiest way for me, once I've located my battery disconnect switch, hoping my solenoid is at least thunking, just something else going on with it, is I'm going to listen. I'm going to hit this multiple times and listen to save me time in locating my battery disconnect solenoid for my house batteries. Okay, I'm going to listen inside the coach. Is it in here? Because sometimes it'll be in here. Sounds more like it's outside. Okay, again, to save time, I've already located it. I located it just like I told you guys. I kept hitting the button and found it. If not, it might have taken me quite a while. Let me show you why. It's a real tiny compartment. I can see my battery, but my house battery disconnect is way up in there. And that's hard to see as well as hard to get to. Honestly, if I had to get to that, I'd probably climb up under here. So, for the sake of this, I might climb up under here and give you guys a better view. There we go. Battery disconnect solenoid. Right there. Not sure if you guys noticed or if you guys can see on this video, but located right next to it, I also have a DC breaker. So if I'm trying to track down that voltage, which somebody will, because I'm not getting 13 volts on this battery, those are two of the places I'm going to check for my DC voltage. From the battery disconnect, like we've discussed on the trailers and the fifth wheels, we go directly inside of our unit. To our distribution center. Here we can see that we're one piece. We have AC breakers on this side, AC, and we have DC low voltage fuses on this side. A tip that I wanted to share with you guys today, let's say you're on one of these, and yeah, we have some square bits right here, easy, but then we have a star bit. Maybe you don't have one, you didn't bring it with you, and you want to check these fuses, right? Remember, we need our voltmeter set to DC, V for voltage, DC. We need red on a positive and our black test lead on a ground. I don't see a ground over here. I could take this apart and have the ground bar from the AC, maybe a ground over here on the DC, but when in a pinch, look around you. Remember that all the metal on these RVs is one with the ground. So I've got an AC outlet over here. I've got a ground right there. Look at there. So, ground from the AC plug. If you're by the front door, ground on that door frame. Check that fuse. Okay, tools to help you when you don't have things accessible to you. Now, that's our house side. Remember that we're going from our distribution center. If it's a switched appliance, we're going to that switch, then that appliance. If it is not a switched appliance or a switched item, we're going directly to it. Refrigerators, air conditioners. Those are the two easiest that I can think of off the top of my head. There's probably more. Somebody will probably let me know. Remember, we need it to the switch, then we need it through the switch. Switches do short out and they get stuck closed. I've seen them also get stuck open, have heat, and have damage. Okay, they'll start blowing fuses when they do that. Now we go over to our chassis side. Can almost guarantee, unless you're working on a Mercedes, battery's going to be up here in the front. Same thing, these will have battery boost solenoids. Let's say it's dead and you want to use your house batteries to get that boy started up. Some of them actually have chassis battery disconnects. Here I see a solenoid. Wondering what type of solenoid that is. Is it chassis battery disconnect? Is it battery boost? Well, so I'll look for a battery boost switch inside. Here I see one, auxiliary start. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. Again, I'm gonna hit it and I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna listen. So that's one way that I can identify. This is my auxiliary start solenoid right here, okay? A second way you can identify if you're ever in question, right? Because you can have 3, 4, you can have several battery disconnect solenoids or solenoids in general. I'm gonna take my voltmeter, again, switch it to V for voltage, then switch it over to DC. If this is a battery boost, then I should see 2 different voltages. I'm gonna let my voltmeter talk to me. I tell everybody that I teach, I call this being intimate with your voltmeter. Your voltmeter is gonna tell you, it's trying to tell you more than just you're seeing voltage or you're not seeing voltage. You can tell what different voltages are, you can tell a multitude of things with this voltmeter. As we go through these classes, I'm gonna help this become your best friend while working on RV. So, I should have a ground here. If this is my battery boost solenoid, I should see battery voltage from this engine battery, which we have 12.5, and as we've already seen, because we were inside, we had around 10 volts fluctuating on our house battery. So if I'm over here and this is the morning, guys. So if I'm over here and this is in fact my battery boost solenoid, I should see the 12.5 or the 12.3 on one side. I should see that 11 volts on the other side. Come down here for one large post, and we are seeing the 12.5. Okay, hit that again in case you couldn't see it. We are seeing the 12.5, and then to my other post I am seeing that 10 volts fluctuating up to 11. So I verified that this is a battery boost solenoid. I can see that I also have a DC breaker located near it. If this was a chassis battery disconnect, then on one post I would see the chassis battery voltage. On the other post I would see 0 voltage, because it's supposed to let power through to your chassis related requirements. Same thing for the house battery disconnect. If my converter is unplugged on that house battery disconnect solenoid, I should see voltage from my house batteries on one post, and this one's easier to get to, so I'll tell you here. Should see voltage from my house batteries on one post. If I'm unplugged, no converter voltage, I should see 0 on the other side if it's not activated. If I'm plugged in and I've got my converter going, then I should see battery voltage on one post and converter voltage on one post. I might have that 10 volts and I'd have 13.3 on the other side, somewhere around there, okay? We'll save going into detail a little bit more later on how to check these, because just because you're seeing voltage on one and not through does not mean that your solenoid is bad, whether it's a battery boost, whether it's a house disconnect, whether it's a chassis disconnect. Okay guys, so that about wraps it up for the Class A's. Let's do a refresher. Again, on the house side, we started our battery, which is on the other side. Typically the batteries are under this front step. If it's not under this front step, we check our side compartments. Once we've located the battery, it's going to go to the DC breakers. Remember guys, those are typically located very near your battery, which we saw on that one back there. Near, but kind of hard to get to. That DC breaker was right back there. After we go DC breaker, we're going to go to that battery disconnect. When you have a solenoid and you're not sure where it's at, is it inside the coach under the bed? They love to put them there. I've seen them placed under the kitchen slide out. Is it in one of these basements and I want to save time because I don't want to walk to every single basement? Is it behind a fake wall somewhere and I really need to hunt for it? Well, I'm gonna be hitting that switch and listening. Okay, to our battery disconnect solenoid, through our battery disconnect solenoid to our distribution center, which in this case is located in our bedroom. Distribution center, some people call it the fuse panel. It is. Okay guys, as we go on to the Class A's, I'm going to start with gasoline, then we'll go on to diesel. Remember, this is the DC system without the converter, okay? We're just checking DC system, not including the converter. The gasoline and the diesels have a few small subtle differences. I'll be showing you those today, okay? So we start with locating our house battery. I've seen them in the side basement compartments, the back area. Check the back basement areas, but a lot of them like to put them under the steps, just like your Class C drivable motorhomes. In this instance, to save time, we can see there's our house batteries. You can also see a high amp fuse over there, maybe some DC breakers, but it's kind of hard to see in there. Oh, I don't see any. Okay, from there we're going to go to DC breakers. Our DC breakers in this case, I've already found them, are located where our battery disconnect solenoid is. Again, we're on the hunt for a battery disconnect solenoid, right? We saw on our Class C that we were on the driver's side about midway, right behind our battery. Let's take a listen. Okay, sound of the solenoid clicking and activating and deactivating is coming from the front of the coach. So I come to the front of the coach. It's easy for me to see, right? I have two. How am I going to tell which one is house, which one is anything else? I can use my voltmeter. We're on V for voltage. We'll go to D to select DC voltage. Just clamp this down here. Find me a ground. Okay. Probably need a better ground. Let's try. Looks everything's rusty down here. .9, so the voltmeter is working. See my lights on inside. Probably just not on a good ground is what I'm hoping. This looks like the best ground I can get though. Alright, there we go. Turn this way, try to relieve a little bit of glare. Got some rust a little bit preventing me from Checking good voltage. All right, I've got 13.2, so that indicates to me voltage like I would see off of my converter. I am plugged in. 13.2. My house battery disconnect is on. This is probably my house battery disconnect, but let's check this one. I'm seeing 12.9 and 13.2. So 12.9, does that correspond to my engine battery voltage? You guys can't see that, can you? 12.9. So here's my chassis battery. I've got 12.9, I've got 13.2. Battery boost solenoid, house disconnect solenoid. Has some fuses I can check here in case I'm missing 12 volt in a certain spot. Unfortunately, those are unlabeled, so you might just have to go through and check depending on what you're looking for. As we discussed, we're going house battery, battery disconnect. We have some fuses out here. We have a high amp breaker close to the batteries located down here. You can see we have some DC breakers. From there, guys, stays the same. Okay, we go inside, we go to our distribution center. We go to our switch or our appliance. If we're at a switch, we go to the switch, through the switch to the appliance, such as a light. Chassis is kind of the same thing. Chassis battery, remember guys, the engine is up front on these. Okay guys, we're almost there. We've made it to the last in our episodes of tracing down DC voltages in your RV and motorhomes. We are on the Class A diesel. This is where things change a little bit, but this should have been repetitive enough by now to help some of it stick in your head, okay? Starting with the house batteries, the coach batteries, okay? Diesels, unlike the gasoline, the engine is in the back. So, I mean, 9 times out of 10, your batteries, house and chassis, are gonna be located in the back near the engine, which we can see right here, okay? Now, for those of you that are very new, battery should have label. Here I can clearly tell without using my voltmeter which is house and which is chassis for the engine. These are 6-volt batteries, so while they're great for a slow discharge and have great amp hours for inverters and things like that, they're not a high output type of battery. They don't have a CCA rating for cold cranking amps. They don't have a MCA rating for max cranking amps. You know, they are for a steady pull, but not a 500, 600, 700 amp pull quickly to start the engine. Okay, so seeing that these are 6 volts, I could dust this off a little bit, and somewhere under here it'll probably tell me that it's a 6-volt battery. Okay, you can do that. Trying not to get too much of that grease on me, whatever. Okay, but if I didn't, some of the tips I taught you earlier could help you to determine it. I'm plugged in right now, so if everything is working correctly, I should see 13 volts on one set of these batteries and a different voltage on the other set of batteries. So now that we've located our batteries near the rear of the RV, we can see in this center actually that we have multiple solenoids. Looks like multiple DC type of breakers. Okay, looks like actually we might have a knob style breaker here. Okay, so this would indicate to me if I was looking for a battery disconnect and didn't see it here before I give up. Well, I do actually have some over here. I would come over here to this compartment, open it on up, and I've got a chassis battery disconnect switch right here, and here are those other DC breakers, push button style DC breakers. All right, so we're lucky right now. We can see that we have a lot of low amperage fuses. We can see that we have 2 battery solenoids over here. Okay, but let's say we couldn't find them. Let's stick to that same rule of thumb that I've been teaching you guys. Generally close to the front door. Sometimes above the front door is where your battery disconnect switch will be, but most times it's right here as soon as you walk in the door. Don't forget to look above you though. There's usually some type of compartment up here. Sometimes your switch will be up there for your battery disconnect. So we come, hit our house battery disconnect switch, and we can clearly hear that it's outside in the rear of this diesel motorhome. We're down here in our battery station. Remember guys, if you're not sure which one is what, well, in this case you can actually look. If I follow some of these cables, you can probably see that they'll be going over here to my house batteries, or you can use my voltmeter. Okay, voltmeter, it's on V for voltage already, but we're on AC, so we need to go to DC voltage. Okay, now let me check a few of these. Also, something to remember guys, these 6 volts, they are ran in series and parallel. And when you have a series connection, it's not truly a positive or a negative because it's connected to both, okay? If you're wanting to use a ground off of these batteries, or if you want to check voltage on the positive, you need to look for the ones that are in parallel, which will be negative to negative, positive to positive, okay guys? Don't try to check voltage using a ground or a positive from the series, which is positive to negative. And do not, I see this a lot, do not hook up a jumper to these posts that are on a series connection. You will burn your leads up, you will burn these batteries up, you'll cause some damage, okay? Remember to use the ones that are in parallel, positive to positive for your positive, negative to negative for your negative. Also, you can look for the large one that's going out, the ones that are going into the coach. Here's my main chassis ground. You can see the large one, right? That's my main positive coming off of these batteries. So knowing that these are in parallel and that this is a ground, I'm going to go with this ground and check voltages on these solenoids to see which is which. So I've got 11 and 12. Actually 13, 6 and 12. Do I have 12 on these engine batteries? 12, 5 on the engine batteries. So I've just shown myself because I have 13 on this side and I'm plugged in, that's converter voltage. This is my house voltage. This is my engine battery voltage. This tells me that this is a battery boost. It is not my house battery disconnect. Using my voltmeter, I come up here, check my left large post, 13.59. I check my left large post, my right large post, 13.61. This is my house battery disconnect. Okay, so if I'm not getting voltage inside of my coach, I come out here, I have voltage. I come over here, do I have voltage? If I don't, we'll go into troubleshooting in a later video, okay? So stay tuned for that to see how we check and test battery disconnect solenoids. Like we've talked about earlier, we go here, we have multiple DC breakers, we have fuses, battery disconnect, into the coach, to our distribution center, our fuse panel, okay? From our fuse panel, we go to switch, if it's a switched appliance, to the switch, through the switch, to that appliance, slide motor, lights, awnings, okay? If it's a non-switched appliance, we go from that distribution center, which is called a fuse panel also, to our appliance, refrigerator, air conditioner. Same thing with the chassis. If I have a chassis battery disconnect switch located in this area anywhere, I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna listen, where is that solenoid? And I'm gonna locate it, okay? However, on this one, we already located, because we were in here and we saw the circular with the large post, we saw that we had a knob style battery disconnect already, and it was clearly labeled chassis. So we know there is our chassis battery disconnect. All right guys, thanks for hanging out with me through these videos. I hope that you learned something. Hope that it helps you to track down power more efficiently, to locate all the items you need, DC breakers, fuses, locate your batteries quicker on these units, as well as the fifth wheels and trailers, by looking for vents. Okay, remembering that if it's a diesel, the batteries are close to the engine in the back. If it's a gasoline model, the batteries are closer to the front where the engine is. Okay, they don't want to draw that current out through long distances by having long lengths of cable, so they're going to put that relatively close to where your engine is on these drivables. Okay, again, thanks again guys, stay tuned. Some of our next videos coming up, we'll have some real basics such as how to check roofs, waste valves, leaks, and we'll have some things back on the electrical side, such as how to check your converter, how to check your inverter, how to test and check a battery disconnect solenoid. All right, appreciate you guys for watching.